Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 28th, 2019 Placer County Transportation Planning Agency meeting, the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission meeting, and the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency meeting. We will begin our meeting with a flag salute led by Bruce.
Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Will the clerk be kind enough to call the roll?
Baker. Broadway. Burris. Holmes.
Here.
Howishell.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Mackey. Here. Bueller.
Here.
Wright. Good morning.
All righty, thank you. We have a quorum. There'll be no closed session, and so we'll strike that. I'll ask for, on item D, approval of action minutes, June 26, 2017.
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of June 26, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Hearing none. Item E, agenda review. Is there anything to,
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's a pink sheet in front of you, which is a revised agenda denoting some small typos in the consent calendar to update the fiscal years for those associated items that are shown in bold. Other than that, there's no changes to the agenda.
all right. Anyone on the board have any changes? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Now is the time for anyone in the public that wishes to address the agency board on any item that is not on the agenda. Please step forward and announce your name, and seeing none, we will close public comment. Move to item G, the consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Does anyone want to move anything from the consent calendar? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, I'll ask for approval of the consent calendar for PCTPA.
Move approval of the consent calendar for PCTPA. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Hearing none, we will now move to item H, consent calendar for Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Planning Services Agency. Anything on that calendar that needs to be pulled for discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved. Now, it is time for item I, a 9:00 a.m. public hearing, Auburn Municipal Airport Layout Plan and Narrative Report Consistency Plan by Mr. David Melko. Good morning, Mr. Melko.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we have a fairly extensive staff report. It's 4 pages, a little bit unusual for PCTPA, and then we have a consistency analysis that's attached that's a little bit over 5 pages. So PowerPoint presentation here will be an attempt to summarize all of that material, and hopefully afterwards, if there are still any questions, be able to answer those. So, as it was noted, we have before us today the Auburn Municipal Airport Layout Plan and their company narrative report, and there's a consistency determination for that particular effort with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan for Auburn Municipal Airport. So, for the people that may be a little bit new to the commission, the role of the Airport Land Use Commission is to adopt and maintain an airport land use compatibility plan around each of the 3 public airports that we have in Placer County, Lincoln Regional Airport, Auburn Municipal, and Blue Canyon. And the secondary role for the commission is to review various changes to plans, those being general plans, specific plans, zoning ordinances, building regulations, airport master plans for various public agencies, that are within the airport influence area of an airport. And the graphic up there shows the airport influence area for Auburn Municipal Airport. So today, the commission basically has three choices in making its consistency determination. It can find that the airport layout plan is consistent with the Auburn Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. We'll probably from now on use the acronym LUCP. The second action the second version of your potential determination could be finding that the Auburn layout plan is consistent subject to conditions. And the third one is to find that the layout plan is inconsistent based on specific conflicts with the airport land use compatibility plan. This is a map showing where Auburn Airport is located. Whenever you do these exercises, you always need to have a project location map, so this particular graphic serves that purpose. So the layout plan and narrative report. The layout plan is basically a set of drawings. It shows existing and proposed airport facilities, and it shows existing and proposed development. Within the staff report, there is a little bit further description of what an airport layout plan is. Also in the staff report, there is further description of what a narrative report is, and this is a document that accompanies the layout plan and basically identifies the goals, objectives, and various FAA requirements, as well as state requirements, produces an aviation demand forecast for a 20-year period, identifies a preferred alternative. In the Auburn Airport layout plan case, there were 5 alternatives that were looked at, and then you produce a 20-year capital improvement program. So one of the most significant aspects of an airport layout plan is the operations, number of planes operating in and out of the airport. So in terms of existing operations, existing being 2015, there's a total of around 70,000 operations with slightly less than 210 aircraft based there. The master plan, which is the middle column there, it shows a horizon year of 2025. So the master plan was the plan that was produced in 2006 by Auburn, and it was used as the basis as required by state law for the Auburn Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. So the compatibility plan is based on that middle column. So total operations projected back in 2006 would be 104,000 by 2025, with slightly less than 300 aircraft based. Now we have before us an airport layout plan, which is an update of the master plan. And having worked with the FAA, Auburn has, they've come to an agreement that there's slightly less than 79,000 operations that will occur by year 2035 with about 225 aircraft. So as you can see, overall, the number of operations and aircraft operating at Auburn or predicted to operate at Auburn will be less than what was forecast back in 2006. The right-hand column shows the growth rate between 2015 and 2035. And for the most part, everything is under 1% annual growth rate, except for jet aircraft. Basically, you're going from nothing to 3 by 2035, and more helicopter activity. And then the other category, which primarily includes what is described as ultralight aircraft. So the most significant capital improvement in the capital improvement program for the Auburn layout plan is the proposed runway extension. Runway extension is highlighted with the yellow area at the top box. And on the left-hand side, the runway extension is proposed to extend 390 feet to the west and to the east, approximately 240 feet. So a total of a 600-foot extension to occur with the runway extension. All of the runway extension would occur on airport property. So Auburn worked very hard to try to contain the actual physical footprint, and including what's called a threshold area, which is an area beyond the end of the runway, all within Auburn city property. So as you can appreciate with these types of efforts, they take years. And the city of Auburn initiated this layout plan back in September 2015. They received conditional approval from the FAA in October 2018, and they submitted the layout plan to the ALUC in May 2019. Why the gap in time? That can be explained that Auburn tried to get clarification on the FAA conditions that were in the condition approval letter, and if you recall, there was a shutdown of the federal government there for a while, and so there was no communication. So it took some time to get clarification on that letter. So in July, we put together a project development team that involved the city staff and the county staff, and the city staff presented the layout plan to the county staff because the unincorporated area surrounds the airport. And in terms of land use planning, there would be some impacts, or impacts is the wrong word. There just needs to be coordination. And so today we're here for the public hearing. So in the consistency analysis that's attached to the staff report, the ALUCP describes 4 factors that we have to go through. So it's noise, safety, airspace protection, and overflight. And for noise, we have 3 graphics here that will show the noise contours. So 65 decibel noise contour. So the blue is the existing, and the lavender purple, color of my shirt, is the proposed. And as you can see, basically the footprint for the existing is fairly contained within the airport. The footprints for the proposed are broken up into distinct areas. There is slightly an enlarged area to the west. Overall, the aerial extent, the acreage, is less than what was shown under the 65 decibel contour. The 65 decibel contour is important because residential, whether it's single family or multifamily, is not allowed under the airport land use compatibility plan. It would be an incompatible use. The 60 decibel contour, that's basically sort of the threshold for where residential can occur with a fair amount of noise mitigation. And as you can see, the existing footprint is shown in the blue hash mark, and the green is the proposed. Once again, slightly enlarged area to the southwest, but overall, in terms of aerial extent, there is less acreage devoted to the 65 or 60 decibel contour. Lastly, we have the 55 decibel contour. This is an area where people, when they play outside, work outside, don't really notice the noise impacts. And so while noise mitigation is still required for homes under the building code, people can do their things outside and not necessarily be impacted by overflight of aircraft. And as you can see, the existing is a fairly large footprint. It's smaller with the proposed. Once again, to the south of the existing, there is a slight expansion of the noise footprint for the 55. Now, on safety. Safety, we look at safety in terms of the number of people on the ground that may be impacted by a potential aircraft accident. And so when we look at safety, you look at safety in terms of the proposed project and the proposed project area. In this case, it's the airport. And so there are no incompatible uses proposed at the airport that would be of concern in terms of safety compatibility. That said, and we'll get to this a little bit later, there are compatibility zones beyond the airport that involve safety because there are people on the ground and aircraft come and fly over those areas and into the airport. And so that sort of impact cannot be determined at this point, at this level of planning. We have to go through an update of the airport land use compatibility plan to determine whether any of those safety zones beyond the airport need to be updated. Airspace protection. So airspace protection basically it deals with height, building height. And once again, in terms of the physical footprint of the airport, the airport runway elevation is at 15 1,540. And the horizontal surface is 150 feet above that, so that's at 1,690 elevation. And there's nothing proposed at the airport in terms of buildings, building height, that exceeds that 150-foot height threshold. So from an airspace protection, once again, you're looking at the project, there's nothing being proposed that is an incompatible use. Once again, once you get beyond the airport, you have to look at the other related zones and determine whether or not there may be any significant impacts. Now, with the runway extension, these threshold zones basically expand by the dimension of the runway extension itself. So 390 feet to the west and 211 feet to the east. Those are the blue lines for the proposed. So wrapping up here, so on noise, we find noise, safety, airspace protection, and overflight, the four evaluation factor. We basically conclude that the layout plan is conditionally consistent on noise, safety, and overflight. It is consistent on airspace protection. So in order to determine the impacts of noise, safety, and overflight compatibility, we need to update the airport land use compatibility plan. So with that intro, the staff recommendation is that the layout plan and narrative report are consistent, subject to the condition that the airport layout or airport land use compatibility plan be updated to reflect the proposed changes to the airport. And with that, our recommendations as embodied in the staff report are for you to conduct a public hearing today. There'll be probably some people here that would like to speak to this issue. We recommend that you make a consistency determination based on the staff recommendation, and is also endorsed by the Technical Advisory Committee. Based upon you making the recommendation or making the consistency determination on our recommendation, we request that you direct staff to proceed with an airport land use compatibility plan update and authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign an agreement with the City of Auburn for that airport land use compatibility plan update. And I would be glad to take questions. That was a lot of information condensed in a fairly short presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Melko. Does any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Melko? Supervisor Euler,
Couple questions. So it appears that the extension of the runway primarily is being done to facilitate the introduction of jets, since we have none and we're anticipating some after this.
Well, it's being primarily introduced to attract more business and corporate aircraft, some of which would be jet aircraft. Yeah.
So, and I don't know the answer to this, is jet fuel different from what fuels conventional prop planes?
I believe it is.
Okay. So when you did the safety analysis, now we're talking about transportation and storage of jet fuel, which I believe is more volatile. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's effectively kerosene.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that was the transportation storage of jet fuel on site where none exists today was part of the safety analysis?
The safety analysis looks at the impact if an aircraft accident occurs and hits the ground.
Okay.
Basically just
So it has
nothing to do with the
operation
transport.
that facilitates
Right.
using jets there?
Correct.
Okay. And then, again, with the introduction of jets, I'm curious to look at the noise overlays, because it's a bit counterintuitive that if you have jets flying in and out of there now, that the noise envelope shrink.
Well, generally, the general aviation aircraft, as well as just regular jet aircraft, are becoming more fuel efficient and becoming quieter. I mean, that's just the technological trend. And so what the noise contours here take into account is, and these are 2035 noise contours. And so it's basically assuming a fleet that will be quieter and more energy efficient than today.
Okay,
Yeah, it's much like cars.
okay. So in terms of the safety side of it and the introduction of the new fuel, both storage and transportation, if that impact isn't analyzed here, where is that analyzed, do you know?
Well, you can make the recommendation that we look at it as part of the airport land use compatibility plan. I mean, the commission can do, as part of the condition, to move forward, you could request that we look at that. It's not normally looked at within the compatibility plan. It's probably done as part of a project, environmental.
I wouldn't want us to stray outside of our purview. I was
Okay.
just curious as
Right.
to where that might happen.
Yeah,
If not-
it would be a project environmental.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes, please.
Push your little button
I have no button.
there. Over there.
Button.
I have no button. All the way over there, excuse me.
Sorry, I should have helped you out there.
It's all right. If I can follow up, I had some concerns about the jet traffic as well, although it's only an increase from 0 to 3. Typically, my understanding is that jet aircraft approach a runway on a much flatter approach, much farther out. And so is there a pattern shift for that type of aircraft? And if so, I haven't seen anything in the packet. And does that noise signature shift for the jet traffic as opposed to regular general aviation traffic?
The analysis prepared by Jacobs Engineering for the City of Auburn didn't reveal anything along that line. Once again, we'll look at that as part of the compatibility plan update. And I would like to note that the 2006 master plan did include jet aircraft. The reason there is no jet aircraft at the Auburn Airport is because the runway has not been extended. So the master plan included that type of aircraft, and therefore the compatibility plan took that into account, but the runway was never extended, and so you physically can't accommodate jet aircraft at this point in time.
Okay.
So, but we can look at that further in the compatibility plan update.
With respect to fuel sales, I would assume that you've got to update your plant to accommodate above-ground jet fuel
They
storage.
probably already have jet fuel there. CHP flies out of there, so they run Jet A out of their helicopters.
Do
So I
they?
imagine Jet A is already on site.
Our
There's-
consultant is shaking
yeah.
his head, yes.
Okay.
There's, they do have above-ground storage, and there are, within the compatibility plan, restrictions on fuel storage. I would like to point out, though, that it's not really the purview of the commission to manage the operation of the airport. So I mean, the statutes are pretty clear that we stay out of the actual operational aspect of the airport, so, but there are policies within the plan that deal with fuel storage.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. I'll open up the public hearing. Anyone in the audience wish to address the agency board on this item? Okay, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for,
Yep,
oh,
Yep,
wait,
yep,
oh,
yep.
wait.
reopen.
Oh, reopen the public.
Answer some questions, I guess.
Morning.
Commissioners. My name is Justin Ritter with Jacobs Engineering, consultant for the City of Auburn. So just wanted to provide one clarification on that, correct, yes, jet fuel is currently sold at the airport. They are below-ground tanks currently. We did, within the plan, provide an area to accommodate above-ground tanks in the future and provide areas and safety setbacks for that. But jet fuel is sold there, and jets do operate in and out of the airport today.
Oh, okay.
Need to update the chart. It's at
Yeah.
0.
The chart says 2015, and when we started that's a based aircraft number. So aircrafts that are registered to be based at the City of Auburn is what that number is. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Anyone else, since I reopened the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I'll reclose the public hearing. Bring it back to the commission for direction. Is there any comments?
Oh, that's your button.
Mr. Chairman, I would.
There you go, I got your button.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I
Kurt.
was just gonna move that we find the City of Auburn municipal airport route plan narrative consistent with the Placer ALUCP, subject to conditions that the ALUCP be updated to reflect the assumptions and proposals of the City of Auburn's airport route plan and narrative report.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve the item. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved. Thank you very much, Mr. Melko. Thank you all for being here. All right.
We don't have to do the other two? Yes, that's
No, we just needed to find one.
okay.
And now we'll move to item J, the Interstate 80 Auxiliary Lanes Project Update.
Thanks.
Again, Mr. Melko presenting.
Moving from planes to automobiles. Okay. So we have the staff report, and today we have a presentation on the I-80 Aux Lanes project. It's been a while since that there's been a presentation before this board on this particular project, and we felt that it would be timely to do such a presentation. I have today with me Elizabeth Diamond, who is our consultant project manager with Dockin Engineering, and she will, we will tag team on this presentation. There's probably about 30 slides, and I'll do about 5, and she'll do about 25 of them because she's got all the technical knowledge and all the background, and so she'll lead the bulk of the discussion. But starting it off here, we have a photo here that was recently taken by our executive director on Monday. And as you can see on the eastbound, which is on the right-hand side of the slide, there's a lot of traffic trying to get to Rockland Road and to Sierra College. And as you can see, the truck there trying to move over from the merge lane off of 65. And while the westbound traffic doesn't seem to be as heavy, you can see that line of traffic lining up to get onto State Route 65. So with that recent picture, move on. So the project, it's called an auxiliary lane project, but it consists of 2 locations. Location 1 is the eastbound auxiliary lane from State Route 65 to Rockland Road. And then in the westbound location 2, westbound direction, it's actually a 5th lane. It's not an auxiliary lane. And that is slightly east of Douglas Boulevard, and extends to slightly west of Riverside Avenue to the Placer-Sacramento County line. We have 5 goals with respect to this project: to reduce congestion and improve travel times and traffic operations. Safety is a big consideration. When you see traffic like that, as shown in the slide, you do get a number of accidents, and that comes with the traffic congestion. If we can decrease the hours of delay, the average speeds will increase, and the motorists traveling through this area will be happy, and commerce will also will be happy too in terms of freight delivery. We've been working on this project for several years here, and it's close collaboration with the Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans and the City of Roseville and the City of Rockland. And we've got a project development team that involves collaboration with all of those individuals. So the delivery path here, this project, well, I can remember programming this project back in the early 2000s, so it's been around for a while, but the project study report and the funding agreements began and were run through between 2012 and 2013. We did the preliminary design and the technical studies in 2014. Community workshops in Rockland and Roseville were held in 2015. The project was approved by this board back in April of 2016. A CEQA document was approved in October. Backtracking, actually, there was a NEPA document, a categorical exclusion, that was also approved in August. So the environmental has been approved for this project. We are currently in final design and right-of-way acquisition. And depending upon funding, well, the final design phase, if everything continues at the reasonable pace that we've been able to achieve at this point in time, we should be able to complete this project by June 2020. With that, then the project would be turned over to the Office of Engineer at Caltrans, and Caltrans would most probably begin construction depending upon funding in 2021. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Diamond with Dockin, and she'll take us from the next couple of slides. Yeah, that one.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here today. I'm going to review a little bit of the project features so you have at least a broad background understanding of what this project will do. So we're going to start by talking about location 1, which is the eastbound auxiliary lane between State Route 65 and Rockland Road. So first, to kind of understand what the project is doing. We have an existing condition out there now where we have 4 lanes coming from the west, passing underneath State Route 65. You have that flyover ramp coming from 65. So you actually have five things trying to go on there as you pass under and join that ramp. The 5th lane, of course, is the on-ramp. It merges right into the 4th lane. You also have an HOV preferential lane, which dies out right about the same location. So you got 5 activities going down to 3. Once you get them down to 3, you have an off onto Rockland Road. That off-ramp is extended out a bit, and it does stack up and back up, and doesn't have sufficient capacity. So with the project, what we will do is we will add a lane. And so that lane, when you come off of 65, will merge into that 4th lane like it does now, but that 4th lane will just keep on going. And so you'll be able to keep on going, and if you don't do a thing, you'll get off right on Rockland Road. We will, in the 3rd lane, develop a second off. So you will actually have 2 offs at Rockland Road. So what that does for you is it reduces the amount of weaving that's going to go on, and it's going to give you more capacity coming off that off ramp, where it will merge into the existing interchange configuration. So to make that happen, we have to build some things. So in addition to the lane itself, you have to make room for the lane itself. So as the lane starts off from 65, and you can see in the picture in the lower in the middle there, the terrain, you start off with the local terrain being a little bit lower than the highway. So picture those things coming closer. And as you do that, you have some grade issues that you have to deal with. So we do have some fills, and we do have some barrier rail and retaining wall that will go in. As you travel down to the east, you'll see in the yellow line, and the exhibit above it trying to tell the story, we are adding new sound wall. So the dark orange line is the existing sound wall. The bright yellow line is showing you where new sound wall is going on. That new sound wall will be sitting on top of a retaining wall in order to protect the grade and hold up the sound wall. The picture on the top is just to show you what the existing wall across the highway looks like. We're going to talk about that a little more in a minute. As we continue on towards Rockland Road, the grade changes, and now all of a sudden China Garden's higher than the freeway. So we do that same thing, but the wall needs to hold up a different side. So the exhibit up on top gives you an idea. We're going to maintain the existing sound wall, but we're going to need to build another retaining wall below it to hold up China Garden Road and allow room to widen the highway. As you continue on to Rockland Road, you can see there the off-ramp and the lane would continue on and merge into the existing lanes that are there at Rockland Road. Moving to the second location of the project, which is in Roseville. This is now the westbound direction, and we're traveling from Douglas Boulevard to Riverside Avenue. In this situation, we're doing something a little bit different. First of all, we have we have 6 lanes. You come in from 65 and it's merging down and you come past Eureka, Atlantic, and as you approach Douglas Boulevard, you have 5 lanes. That 5th lane is a trap lane off onto the Douglas Boulevard off-ramp. Then you have an optional choice. You can go straight or get off from that 4th lane. As you travel down to Riverside Avenue, then you can get off, and then those loop and slip ramps provide the on-ramp from Riverside. When you get on there at Riverside right now, you have your own lane, and you get in that 5th lane and you keep going. So what this project's going to do is it's going to extend that 5th lane so that it connects from the 5 lanes up above Douglas to the 5 lanes below Riverside. So there's some work that has to be done to fit those ramps in a little differently and to modify those ramps a little bit. So that's what the project's going to do. So starting up here on the, as you're approaching from Atlantic, you have the 5 lanes coming. The off-ramp will be remodeled, if you will. Right now, there's a trap lane and an optional lane. The off-ramp traffic is low enough that one ramp will feed those multiple lanes at the intersection. So that's what allows us to make the project happen. That 4th lane's going to continue straight, and that 5th lane's going to continue straight with an optional off. As you pass past Douglas Boulevard, that loop ramp will be reconfigured in order to tie into that 5th lane a little bit differently. Fortunately, the wall you see in the picture underneath Douglas Boulevard is in the right spot and will remain. We don't have to rebuild that particular one. And we'll talk a little bit about what that wall looks like compared to some things we're planning in a minute. As we travel further to the west, the slip ramp from Douglas onto the highway will have HOV preferential lane added. Right now, that is a 1-lane on-ramp with mixed flow. It has a meter, but it does not have the HOV preferential, so this project will be adding that lane. We will merge onto the freeway and we'll just miss that existing sound wall, and we're able to maintain that sound wall. That's the gray one. If you look in the picture up above, that gray sound wall that's out there remains. We will be doing some little bit of wall work and of course barrier rail work in order to protect it and to make room for the lane. As we move further to the west, traveling towards Kirby Way, you'll see the big yellow line. That is a new sound wall. So that's the area, if you look at the 2 pictures up above, there is an existing sound wall within Caltrans right-of-way. The fence is the right-of-way line. In order to make room for the travel lane, we have to take that wall down. We have to build a new wall and a new sound wall further closer to the state right-of-way line. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute as well. The Linda Creek Bridge gets widened. We are also extending sound wall in the purple line. You'll see there, there's some additional sound wall work on either side of the bridge because of the residential property to the north. As we continue on under Kirby Creek, we have some slope paving underneath that bridge. Unfortunately, that is not quite far enough over, so we're going to have to chop the bottom of it off, put a little wall down there, and make room for the lane. As we continue on towards Riverside Avenue, the slip ramp has some minor modifications to move it over a little bit so we can reconfigure the loop ramp so it's a little tighter, get into the 5th lane rather than the 4th lane. And then we're matched up with the 5 lanes that are already there. So that's the overall configuration. Fortunately, most of it is within existing Caltrans right-of-way. We do have some very minor right-of-way acquisitions that are needed. Starting in the eastbound direction for the auxiliary lane, we need, and we have been working with the City of Roseville staff talking about this, we need to utilize a little bit of China Garden shoulder area in order to build that wall along the freeway, just give the contract a little bit of area to work. As we moved around the curve there at China Garden, we need to take a little bit of China Garden, unused portion of China Garden right-of-way and shift it into Caltrans right-of-way in order to get the slopes and things to work with the new ramp. And then again, we'd like to get a permit to work and have a little bit extra room to work. So that's what's going on in the Rockland side of things. In the Roseville side of the project, the westbound Fifth Lane area, we do have one private acquisition. It's on that vacant lot that you see the arrow pointing to, and down below you can see in orange, there is a sliver there that we need in order to make that preferential lane work coming on to the freeway. There is a small, we also need a little bit extra room to work. So that's the private acquisition. We also are working with the Roseville staff on the work behind the wall along Joanne. That was where in the photo I mentioned the existing sound wall comes down, the wall gets moved over, we're tight on the right-of-way line, so we need a little bit of room to work, and then put some landscaping behind the wall to help screen it when we're done. So speaking of landscaping, the aesthetic features of the project, of course, very important, and that's the phase that we're in now. We're trying to work on those details. We've had a focus meeting with the Rockland staff as well as with the Roseville staff to talk about the visioning of what they would like to see or what they think is appropriate in their community. On the Rockland side, we have that sound wall. Of course, you have the other sound wall across the street. They all kind of look the same kind of theme up there in the kind of the reds and beigey colors. So we're looking at doing something similar, cleaning up the wall that's there, and having it blend in with the theme that's already going on. On the Roseville side, you have a little bit more of a hodgepodge of colors and different materials. The reddish wall is the one that's coming down. These two things you see in the photos are the ones that are remaining, the wall underneath Douglas and the sound wall, the gray sound wall. So we're looking at using colors and textures that will try to blend with those, although we are not proposing that exact same wall, that tilt-up wall. We'll probably propose a split-face block look. In terms of landscaping, we're going to replace what's disturbed. It's mostly in the loop areas of the highway that gets most torn up. You can imagine to move the traffic and build the new lanes. There's going to be quite a bit of temporary construction done to keep the traffic somewhere while we're working somewhere else. So the landscaping in those loops will be restored. We are talking with the cities about that. In Rockland, it's very minor work and just pretty much replace. There isn't a lot of disturbance going on there. There is also not a lot of tree removal, but there is a little bit down on the east side, on the west side. On the Roseville side, around Linda Creek, there's a lot of tree removal. In the loops, there's a lot of disturbance. So we're working with opportunities there to not only put that landscaping back, but is there an opportunity to do some of the tree mitigation on site so that we end up with a little bit of an enhanced area. What we can't do on site would be dealt with through mitigation payments per the two local ordinances that the two agencies have. So where are we in terms of time? David went over it a little bit. This gives you another kind of view of what goes on during the final design, kind of expands that final design box. We've completed 65%, which is all kind of the hard layout. And so now we can work on the details with our partner agencies, as well as, you have drains, you have electrical, you've got signs, you've got every little nook and cranny out there that has to be taken care of. So that's what we're doing now. We've also started the regulatory permits, the applications for them, since Caltrans will be building the project, and because the impacts are on Caltrans right-of-way, we're working with them to review those applications and submit them. We're also about to start soon here the right-of-way acquisition phase so that we can, get appraisals done and work on permits, things of that nature. That will let us slide into finishing up basically the PS&E right-of-way permit package that will allow the office engineer then to, the office engineer is an office at Caltrans that puts their jobs out to bid. So PCTPA is working with Caltrans to have Caltrans do the actual construction. They then put on their contract administrator hat because they're the ones hiring the contractor. So they will put all the bidding requirements and documents, that front end part together that Roseville and Rockland are probably familiar with doing when they go out to bid with a project. So Caltrans will be doing that. Their attorneys will look at it. All of that will go on. And then it will go to construction. Those last two pieces, of course, don't get kicked into gear until funding for construction is programmed. So speaking of funding and costs, well, I forgot about this slide. I'll go back. This just shows you some of the activities that went on during 65% design. And that leads to a set of plans and a higher level estimate. So during PA and ED, you do a more order of magnitude gross estimate. As you get into 65% plans, you start measuring everything and calculating and being a little bit more detailed with your estimate. And then that leads you to where are you with project costs. So this is a summary of the overall project costs. We're talking about a little over $29 million for overall project costs. Pre-construction is things like your environmental studies, your preliminary engineering, your PS&E, all those things that I've talked about that have been going on. The hard construction dollars, about $24 million is the current estimate. That has some contingency in it still, but you know, the design isn't all the way finished, so it's appropriate to carry some contingency. Back in 2015, the project was estimated at about $18 million overall, so there is quite a jump over those 4 or 5 years. It's basically the biggest component of that jump, over about $7 million worth, is attributed to just cost escalation. If you look at, Caltrans keeps an index of bid prices and how they, you know, what actual bids are occurring, and they aggregate them and they publish these indexes. And if you go back and you look at the index for roadway work, and those over that period of time up over 40%. And that's just an indication of what our market has been doing. You know, it's a very busy industry right now. There's competition for products, workers, equipment, everything. Now, maybe that'll swing back a little bit for you by the time you get to construction. There have been, of course, some details of design that changed, and we are carrying a little bit higher contingency because some of the volatility and things that have been going on. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David, who's going to talk about funding a little.
Okay, so briefly on project funding, as Liz had noted, in the previous slide, the pre-construction activities are fully funded. That involved, as she had noted, the environmental, the planning phase, the preliminary engineering, the final design and right-of-way phase that we're currently in. Primarily, the funding source for the pre-construction phase is federal dollars from the I-80 bottleneck project that was earmarked many years ago. So, as Celia used to say, that's the project that's the earmark that continues to give, and so it's giving here. The construction phase is currently unfunded. We are currently working on the Placer-Sacramento Gateway Plan. That's a corridor plan that goes from Lincoln and Auburn to downtown Sacramento, and we're working with 14 different agencies on that corridor plan. That corridor plan is a prerequisite for various SB1 funding sources. So the project is included within that planning effort, and that will allow us then to perhaps submit that project along with a package of other projects for SB1 funding. And it's also included in the proposed sales tax expenditure plan. So our next steps, we need to finalize the corridor aesthetics, the landscaping, the sound walls with our partner agencies, Roseville, Rockland, and also with Caltrans. We need to address the comments on the 65% design and then finalize the 90% design effort. And as Liz noted, we've started the regulatory permit process, and we need to obtain those permits so that we can move forward. Right-of-way acquisition, hopefully here, will begin in October and get the various agreements in place, and that should be completed by next April. And complete the 100% design and the comments associated with that. And then we have to work to secure construction funding. And with that, we can then work with Caltrans office engineer to finalize the bid documents, and then construction then can happen. With that, Liz and I are available to take any questions on the project.
Any questions from members? Oh, Mr. Broadway.
Mike, a couple questions just on the funding side. So when we originally planned for this at the 18 million, did we, with an expectation that we, of course, were seeking additional funding, did we have the funds in place? Or were we still, I mean, our half, I know it's increased about, if you split that, you just take 50-50 on the funding was the approach. Did we have the half that we felt we needed?
No, no, this has always been a project that we would potentially fund with the expenditure plan. We have some abilities to apply for some SB1 funding, but it's somewhat of a long shot, if you will, before we have the matching funds for the expenditure plan. We're taking a look at some strategies with Roseville and Rockland on utilizing some other funding to provide matching funds in the short term. But we will have a much higher likelihood of getting this project funded with the expenditure plan in place potentially in late 2020, if that's the direction the board wants to go.
Okay. And then, as it relates to the Placer-Sacramento Gateway, is that an all-or-nothing proposal when we're looking at the approach? Because that includes Capital Corridor and other features, correct?
Yeah, without funding this thing entirely ourselves, our best shot is utilizing and packaging projects with other agencies, such as the Third Track and some other transit projects and State Route 51. Those SB1 dollars it's a very, very small portion of SB1, and we have to put together a package of projects with Caltrans and SACOG and these other agencies that rise to a level of statewide significance in order to compete against projects coming out of the ports of LA and Long Beach and the other major metropolitan areas. So that's the strategy, if you will, that we would like to utilize with or without expenditure plan funding. We stand the best chance to work by working together than we would by ourselves. We've applied at least once with this project by ourselves, and as the other agencies have with their projects, and we've all not been funded. And so that's the strategy of the corridor plan, is packaging projects together, working together, and this package has a better chance of getting funded when we're competing against these larger metropolitan areas.
So when would we be submitting for that as the package, and when would we expect a
The
response?
first potential package, go ahead, Luke, if you want to answer that.
So application, there's a couple programs that we'll be submitting for, but it will be a package of projects across those several programs. And so we'll be submitting those applications in the spring, and then we'll find out sometime in the summer, fall, whether we got that funding or not.
Great. Thank you, Luke. Thanks, Mike. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All righty. Any other comments? Your light is on, did you?
No.
Okay, fine. All righty. Anybody in the audience wish to address the board on this item? Seeing none, there's no action required. It's just for information. I appreciate the information. Well done, thank you. And now we'll move to item K, Regional Transportation Plan Outreach and Schedule. There's no action required. This is an information item. We're looking to Mr. Aaron Hoyt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Board of Directors. I just wanted to announce today the release of our draft 2040 Regional Transportation Plan. We've presented here on several occasions on the various milestones with this plan, and today culminates efforts between ourselves and working with your staffs to develop the project list that really form the foundation of this plan. Also in your staff report, you have a great-looking standalone document as an executive summary that tries to capture the essence of all the different projects and planning activities that we have going on in Placer County, from the funding levels through transit, looking at growth forecasts, roadway improvement projects. It tries to cover the full gamut of what we're doing and what's in essence part of the 200-page Regional Transportation Plan document. With that being said, the Regional Transportation Plan, and I'll refer to it as RTP, is a long-range planning document, as mentioned in your staff report. It looks out 20 years. It lays out the goals, objectives, policies, funding assumptions, and investment portfolio, if you will, for our future transportation system. It's looking at all modes, all aspects of our transportation system. The RTP serves more than just kind of a visioning document and a culmination of each of your general plans, your circulation elements, the transportation studies that have been completed. It serves more than that. It also serves as a mechanism in which we can then take these projects and look for federal and state funding to help implement those. It also serves as a foundation for SACOG's, it serves as a foundation for Placer County's portion of the SACOG 6-county region Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy that'll be released early September. Along with the Regional Transportation Plan is a programmatic level environmental impact report. The California Environmental Quality Act considers the RTPA project, and so therefore we must identify any potential impacts, disclose those, and provide mitigation measures where necessary to address any of those potential impacts. The interesting part about it is because a lot of the projects within the Regional Transportation Plan do not have set alignments yet. We don't know the scope of the projects. Are they maybe widening a project from the inside or outside? So we don't know a lot of the details for some of these projects. So as a result, when those projects do move forward into their own environmental and construction process, they'll have to still go through a project level environmental impact report on those. As I mentioned, we've presented to you over the last year and a half on multiple milestones, from the goals and objectives to our revenue assumptions, the project lists, and we've also hosted 2 separate elected official meetings in coordination with SACOG to discuss the contents of the discussion draft, if we recall back to November 2018, and also to highlight where they were moving into the preferred scenario with that. The various outreach efforts also included online virtual surveys and a workshop at Sierra College campus, in which we had over 2,300 participants join in the conversation of transportation funding priorities and the projects that are being identified through this plan. So to close out the presentation today and the information, today does start the 45-day public review period for the Regional Transportation Plan and the Environmental Impact Report. We will have a public hearing scheduled for September 25th, in which I'll provide more details and a little bit more in-depth presentation on the contents of the plan, what's in there, and we'll probably also hear some public comment about the plan itself. One of the comments that I know that we've already received is there are some early planning efforts that are just beginning in the Resort Triangle area of eastern portion of the county. And so with the development of the Resort Triangle Transportation Plan that's just barely kicking off, we want to look to include or incorporate some of the just overall highlights of what that plan is intending to do to pull that into our plan. And one of the reasons being is the Resort Triangle area from North Star to Squaw Valley on the 89 and 267 corridor really straddle 3 different regional planning agency boundaries between ourselves, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency in the basin, and then the Nevada County Transportation Commission just to the north of that. So we want to make sure that whatever they're looking to implement in the future, that we have some early policy language or some early summaries of their work in our plan. And then we'll close out the public comment period October 14th, in which we'll begin reviewing all those comments in detail, making changes as necessary, and then bringing back the final report for adoption and the certification of the environmental impact report on December 4th. With that, I'd be glad to take any questions about the process, the schedule going forward, and also wanted to note the location of where you can find the electronic document. And if you're interested in reviewing any of the hard copies that we will have at our office and at 5 different libraries throughout the county. With that, I appreciate it.
All righty. Any questions for Mr. Hoyt? I see none. Anyone in the audience wish to address this item? Seeing none, this is just an information item. Thank you so much for your presentation. We'll now move to item L, 2019 Unmet Transit Needs Process and Schedule. Kathleen Hanley presenting. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Once again, Unmet Transit Needs is back on your agenda. We're doing our outreach again for this year. As a reminder, the Unmet Transit Needs outreach process is a requirement of the Transportation Development Act, where we get some local transportation funds, and in order to use those, we have to do this outreach every year. We're doing 2 things different about the outreach this year. First, we're extending the period. In the past few years, we have taken comments from October 1st to October 31st. This year, we'll be starting September 1st and going until October 31st, expanding the comment period 2 months. That change is a reflection from stakeholder leaders who commented that sometimes their email newsletters, for example, go out the 3rd or 4th week of the month, making it hard to get time for folks to get comments in. So we've extended it to 2 months, which is why it's on your agenda in August instead of the traditional September. The second change is that we're moving away from physical workshops. In the past, attendance has been really low at the physical workshops throughout the county, and they've been difficult to schedule. And with the recent successes with the RTP and the Bikeway Master Plan update, we've had a lot of success with online surveys, so we're going to move forward with that in this process. We will still be holding a physical meeting at the public hearing at our Board of Directors meeting at the end of October. So if folks would like to come in person and speak on this item, they're more than welcome to in October. In your staff report, you'll notice that the link to where the survey will be available starting September 1st this weekend. It's at pctpa.net/UTN, and people are welcome to submit comments to me anyway, email, call, stop by the office, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I'm curious, is this a visual representation of what you feel like at a workshop, just kind of hanging out by yourself?
Honestly, I'm a little sad because I always get to go to Tahoe every year, and it's really not a bad work gig, but you win some, you lose some.
I just didn't know if that picture had any significance.
Just hanging on.
Hanging out by yourself.
Anyone else?
Speaking of Tahoe.
Yes.
We would love, again, with the 3 RTPAs that help our region, if we could schedule something maybe at the TMA board meeting where we have an opportunity for all of you guys to be there in October or something. I think that would be great.
Absolutely. So we'll still...
She still gets to go to Tahoe.
Be safe.
Well, I'll be working with all your staffs to figure out what is the best way to get the word out for each individual organization. Is it through your email newsletter, coming to your transportation committee? So we'll still be getting the word out in some physical ways, just not having public workshops at a transit stop, for example.
All right, anything else? Anyone in the audience have any questions about this item? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll now move to item M, the Executive Director's Report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Very quickly, just highlight some items for your interest. One is I wanted to give you a quick update on Assembly Bill 1413, the sub-district language that we've been seeking, along with implementing our outreach strategy for the funding plan. We successfully got through the Senate Finance and Governance Committee. That was the last stop in the legislature in July. However, some significant changes were made as a result of that committee. One of those changes is it went from a statewide bill to a 2-agency bill, most likely right now. So it is going to be limited to San Diego County and Placer County. There is a potential for some other counties to be added at the author's discretion, but for all intents and purposes, it's looking at Placer and San Diego as being the pilot projects, if you will, in that in that bill. And so that is good news in terms of the author was adamant that we be included in that as part of the pilot, and then over the course of the implementation of this over the next 2 to 4 years, the legislature would take a look at expanding this to other agencies. We've been in contact with our coalition, who is all supportive of us being in that pilot project, so we're not receiving any opposition from our former 10 partners. They see this as a method to try the sub-district legislation, which is in place actually in Placer County in the Tahoe Basin, although it hasn't been utilized. A couple other areas, and then now in San Diego and Placer, if this bill is approved and signed by the governor. There is some language that we're still working on with the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator McGuire. We're working with his staff and the consultant. Technically, this item is on the floor of the legislature, but they still, they don't do things quite the way we do them in local government. And so they still can amend the bill when it's on the floor. And so we're working on a rather significant amendment for us and for San Diego County, and that is inclusion of the unincorporated area. With San Diego County, they actually, San Diego, this is their second bill, Senate Bill 805 last year, which was approved, did include the unincorporated area, and it included it by census tract. And so they're going back and tweaking that a bit, if you will. But in our case, having that unincorporated area is very important to this effort. And so we're working on language that really is acceptable to the Senate Finance Committee consultant staff and to the chairman of that committee. That amendment will then be inserted, and it will come to a vote on the floor probably towards the end of the month. We are kind of in crunch week right now. We have to get this amendment approved by Friday, and so we're working very hard with our lobbyist team, and I'd like to thank many of you personally who have been involved in this last minute adjustment to try to get the unincorporated area language back in. So county legislative affairs, Roseville legislative affairs, and our office and many of you are working very, very hard to get this in, this unincorporated area provision in. There is also nexus language that is in the language that is acceptable and was approved, which would allow any project that found a nexus back to the contiguous cities, if you will, which is the language that's currently in the bill. And so it would certainly all of our projects could get funded because they all do tie back to the cities where most of our growth occurs, but it presents us just one more thing to explain if the unincorporated area is not included. So we're working hard and we're hoping for success. We have a lot of meetings coming up here in the next couple days, and so we're hoping to cross the finish line on that item. So, is there any questions before I go on to other things on 1413?
Any questions? I see none.
Okay. The next thing related to the expenditure plan is we're again doing lots of things. We are in our effort to educate the public in South Placer County on the need for this measure and the need for further funding so that the board can so that we can poll and then have that data available to the board to make that decision in 2020. And so some of the activities that we have going on include, you will see, went up this week on all of the electronic reader boards in the county, all 7 of them. You'll see a message directing people to our website, keepplacermoving.com, where they can provide information or where they can find information about what discussion of the need for this funding. We are very shortly going to be in most movie theaters in Placer County. So when you go see a movie in every single theater in Placer County, if you get there, if you have the fortunate circumstance of getting there early, you will see our video and again directing people to the website before every single movie, and that will go through Christmas and the holiday period. And then we're again participating in a number of things, including activities and events here in South Placer County. I'll just rattle off a few. One is on September 14th, as we did last year, we're participating in the Roseville Splash event. It's a very large outreach opportunity for us to, again, direct people to where the information is contained. We are also participating in Hot Chili and Cool Cars, again, the very large Rockland community event. And this is kind of a dual purpose event this year, though. One is for the outreach strategy, but secondly, we're using this event as a thank you to the residents that are located along the Phase 1 construction of the 8065 project, to thank them for their patience and tolerance of this construction. For two purposes. One is because they tolerated and were supportive of this project, but two, we have a number of phases to go, and so we want to continue to work closely with them, and we are working with the city of Rockland and others to create a what we term a VIP area where people can actually go in taste the chili. They can put their lawn chairs out and their tables out in a setting just dedicated to them. And there'll also be a ceremony when we open the event, which will likely include our own Ken Broadway, which will thank the residents when they open the ceremony for hot chili and cool cars, along with Mayor Patterson. The same day, we are having an event, as Board Member Hadeschelt can attest to. We're very happy to report that the Downtown Bridges project is complete in Roseville. Very, very important project to connect our trail system and our bike ped system to a regional system, and this is probably the biggest component of that in some time. And so we will be working with the city of Roseville again, as this is another opportunity for us to do outreach. And then the biggest activity I'd like to report on is in which I think you have a notice. You've received lots of information, and you have a notice on your dais that on September 5th we have the excuse me, I keep saying that, the ribbon cutting for the Phase 1 of 8065 project, and that's going to be a great celebration of a lot of hard work led by our Deputy Director, Luke McNeil-Caird, who's been pivotal in leading a large team to get this project done and on budget and 4 months ahead of schedule, as we usually do with our projects. So this is another great example of a project that we're implementing. We're going to have a number of speakers at the event. We have Senator Brian Dahle is going to be speaking at the event, along with CTC Commissioner Paul Van Konynenberg, who's going to represent the CTC, who was part of the funding strategy. We also have the two mayors, Patterson and Allard, participating in this, and Jim Holmes is going to MC the event. We also have District 3 Director Amarjeet Benapal with Caltrans presenting as well. We'll have a presence from law enforcement at the event as well, with a number of vehicles and things related to emergency access. So we're very happy that this event's coming together, and we hope that you all can attend. This is open to the community, and so we are working closely with folks like Gold Country Media to make sure that the entire community is invited to this event, not our usual just government types. So lastly, I wanted to point out a very important thing in your packet. There's a thing called the safe vehicle rule, and that's if some of you are on the SACOG board know that there's a disagreement between the Trump administration and the California Air Resources Board and the governor on fuel efficiency standards. And the significance of that is that we all, as Aaron pointed out, we're doing our regional transportation plans and our metropolitan transportation plans, and we have to do these very, very elaborate models in order to basically get our projects eligible to be funded. And so we were all kind of set to update our MTP and our RTP and get these projects moving as we've discussed on many occasions. This kind of throws a potential monkey wrench into that, and so SACOG and PCTPA and El Dorado County Transportation Commission are working very closely together to monitor this and to hopefully mitigate the impact of this on projects. Essentially, the longer this lasts, the more impact it has, and so in the article that you have in your packet, you'll see kind of a worst case scenario that SACOG has put out, and that worst case scenario could potentially compromise a lot of the schedules, not the projects themselves, but the schedules for those projects if it drags out in the long term. So we just wanted to point this out to you as a very significant impact on all of our projects in Placer County and the whole region. So, lastly, wanting to mention something coming up to you, which is something we don't usually grapple with, but kind of related to the funding strategy and the outreach plan. We are going to be bringing back to you an administrative policy, which will probably generate a little bit of discussion, but we don't have one, but we need to adopt a social media policy. And so we'll be bringing something to you, probably mainly focused on retention related to social media. So it's probably not going to be a broad-based policy at this point, but something that deals with how we retain records when we implement social media. So with that, I'll be happy. I'll conclude my report, and if you have any questions, be happy to answer it.
Any questions for the executive director?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I had the opportunity with the executive director and Kathleen Hanley to be at an outreach event. Feels like a month ago, but it probably was just a couple of weeks ago. And Mr. Lucan's comment about recognizing Rockland and Roseville, a woman came up and expressed deep appreciation for the Highway 65 project and the convenience in which now she can exit safely going north on Highway 65 and get, I think she lives off of, why can't I think of the roadway that, it's not Fairway, but, well, maybe it is Fairway. But, you know, it's just kind of gratifying. I mean, you talk about the fact that you hold physical public hearings, and there are folks who are attentive and show up, but when you have somebody unsolicitedly just walk up and say, thank you, it really, it's one of those moments that don't often come. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Anyone else? All righty. Board direction to staff. I think we're pretty well covered. Our next meeting will be September 25th, 2019. That concludes our meeting. Thank you.